Welcome to JNUC. I hope everybody enjoyed the keynote and the State of the Union. It's my great pleasure to introduce Richard Purvis and Jeff Freeling, who are going to be talking about what it's like when they started a new company and what they find. So, welcome to JNUC. Let's go.
Thank you, Marcus, and ladies and gentlemen, Marcus Ransom for the Mac Admin Podcast.
And today, on today's presentation, Jeff here is going to read some slides.
Richard is going to make
Sound
a joke.
intelligent. Yeah. And yeah, we couldn't even get that right.
And see, there you go. So that's going to set the tone for this presentation, guys. We're going to throw in a little bit of mandatory disclaimers, and yeah, let's get on with it.
So obviously, any views and opinions we express here are the presenter's own, but we are intending for a serious talk in a parody format. So,
give or take. So
yeah, we are representing ourselves. We do not represent our companies. We do not represent anybody else. It is just us.
Okay. There you go.
So, without doubt, this presentation you are about to witness is going to contain the following. If the button works. There we go. We got some Britishisms.
We got some Dutchisms.
We are going to have some gratuitous Top Gear UK references.
And we're going to use the word faff at some point, for which we are going to thank.
And which we are also grateful to Ben McMule-Toms about.
At some point. We have to work it in.
Hi, Ben. Okay.
All right.
Let's move on to the agenda.
All right, so what are we going to talk about? Well, we're going to talk about this talk is when you start working at a new company or organization, what are you going to find? What's the best way to start looking at a Jamf instance that you're going to take over? So we're going to talk about some tools that you can use. We're going to talk about what not to do, so don't do that.
And we're going to go through doing some basic reverse engineering of policies when you're trying to work out what the heck is going on in this thing. So this is why the next one is appropriate, because when most people start at a new company, so, story time. This one I call the Tale of Two Companies. Names redacted to protect the not so innocent. So, unnamed company 1, unnamed company 2. And I'm going to run these in parallel. So at unnamed company 1, when I started, I was given an old Apple laptop that had obviously seen better days. But that's okay, because at company 2, they gave me a Windows laptop and no credentials. Okay. At company 1, I found that the computer that I had been given had been built by hand. But that's okay, because at company 2, they had me to implement the MDM, so there wasn't even an MDM to enroll anything into. So at number 1, it was enrolled in Jamf, but everything, like I said, had been done by hand. There was no policies, there was no profiles, there was a couple of self-service profiles, there was nothing. But that beats company number 2, where I spent 2 weeks trying to get through all the mandatory training, because it was a secure environment, and trying to get my access credentials. So the fun thing about company 1 is the computer was bound to Active Directory, and the account was already on there, which means somebody had my password, and had put it on a post-it note on the device, and then I still had to manually connect the thing to Wi-Fi. But at the other one, I ended up having to use my personal device on the guest network for 1.5 years. And like I say, the live user account and credentials on the post-it note on the laptop that had just been given to me by a member of HR. And I'm an IT admin. That's secure credentials, privileged credentials that now HR's seen. So,
the big question here is, when you left those companies, I assume you left those. No?
Not commenting.
Right, carry on.
So, and then the fun really starts. So, company number 1, the worst thing that can happen to an Apple systems engineer is the MDM cert has been renewed with a different Apple ID. Yep, that was 1,300 devices. But number 2, that company was very, very on-premise centric, and they wanted me to build a cloud management environment. This is not going to go well. Every device before 2019, specifically September 2019, broken. It's getting management policies, but I got no MDM control. Don't panic. And of course, at company number 2, iOS support existed, but I couldn't get access to either Apple Business Manager or Certificate Portal for various boring reasons involving third-party vendors. I was locked out of the original and the new accounts, and there was no credentials kept anywhere at company number 1. And company number 2, the bane of Mac admins everywhere, explicit proxies on the network doing deep packet inspection and no exclusions, so none of the traffic works. Apple did come to the rescue with company number 1. It is possible to get a push notification certificate moved between Apple IDs. It is a long, laborious process, but it is possible. Can we get a security exception through the network proxy at number 2? Nope. 2 years of trying, nope. And that included meetings to ask permission to have meetings with other people. Yep, that really did happen. And yeah, got the cert on number 1 moved to an account that we did control, and everything, thankfully, has been fine since. So, what do we get from this? And so the moral of the story is take the first day and the first week slowly. Okay? Rome is not built in a day. And it's certainly not built by one person, even though it does feel like it at the time. What you want to do is you want to go around the system and you want to take many notes. I was taking mental notes all the way through my onboarding at both companies. And the reason I was taking mental notes is I was looking to see where the inefficiencies were and what could be improved. And my mind ran out of space at some of them. You are going to meet and greet people all around the IT business, from techs all the way up to members of the network team and anywhere else. You are going to need them because there's probably going to be some sort of politics involved in there somewhere. Things generally will have been done for a reason. They will not necessarily be a good reason. So you must find that reason because if you wade in and start changing stuff, it's going to break. And if things do break, it's going to be like this.
It can destroy your entire face.
Pretty much. And with that, I hand you to Jeff, because he's going to talk about some tools.
Yes. So luckily, when you get a Jamf environment like that, and I'm sure you're going to speak about that in a little bit more, on what we can do with the environment itself, is not necessarily just the interface that we're looking to do things in. There are some tools available out on the market. Again, these are all third-party tools that help me at least along to find my way in an existing Jamf instance. And to paint a picture, I moved relatively, well, when we made this presentation, I moved fairly recently to a new company. I inherited the Jamf instance, and I was like, where do you start? Because the documentation was exactly a blank Confluence page. At the top of the Confluence page, it said Jamf documentation, and that's it. Well, it's not entirely true. There was some documentation, but yeah, not a lot.
But that's okay, because you've got some tools, haven't you?
Yes, I have tools. One of the tools that helped me out specifically is called Kmart. It's not a...
Haven't they just gone bust?
No, not a supermarket.
Okay.
It's not a tool. So Kmart is a tool. It stands for Kick-Ass Mac Admin Reporting Tool. What it does is it uses the Jamf API. It scans the whole thing, and it gives you a super nice report of what does what. The thing's developed by a guy called Nindy Gill. I hope that I say that correctly. If not, my apologies. And yeah, it's available on the GitHub. Now, how would you start doing with such a tool? Again, not the supermarket. That's a different thing. We need to set up some stuff because the tool itself, it runs on your Mac. It's going to talk to the Jamf Pro API, and it's going to need some things. One of the things that it needs credentials. So if I was you, go ahead and create a set of credentials, ideally something that I can only read, just for safety in this case. One thing to note when I played with this tool is that it needed credentials in a specific form. Now, a lot of times when you inherit the system, you would probably all here have seen something like that where you open up a script and there's the password in plain text right there in front of you. Well, this guy thought of that a little bit and said, well, we're not going to put it in our configuration in plain text, but you have to encode that. How do you do that? Well, it's very simple. It gives you the instructions. So when you make the credentials, you have to put it through your terminal, and it spits you out a nice hash. That hash that then put into the configuration of the tool. So you're going to put the credentials into the tool, and that's not just it. There's some other things that you're going to do. And again, I'm going to go not too much into detail. I'm going to go here into like, how do you get this up and running quick? Basically, tick, yes, I want to see everything. So the way to get this working is you need credentials. You need to specify where you want to have the report stored. And that's the output directory. Now, I mentioned you can go really, really deep into the specifics of what you want to see, and this is part of the configuration of how you do that. It's a config file. You can basically say, oh, I only want to see this, or I don't want to see that, or maybe I want to see everything. And like I said, I advise you to, when you just start out, you don't know exactly what's going on, just select everything and then hope for the best. Now, if you do select everything, just be aware of it, it is slow. Very slow. In the environment that I got into, it took about an hour and a half of running. So depending on the size of your environment, of course, if the environment's a bit smaller, it's going to be quicker. If it's larger, you're going to need to have some extended lunch. I suggest you go for Thai food. Relatively tasty. At least you have a good time doing that. Aha. When it's finished, it spits you out a report, and you can see it here on the slide what it looks like. It gives you in a very nice, fancy HTML format, so you can open it in your favorite web browser, and then you can actually get a bit of an idea of the lay of the land, of what the person or persons before you have done with the environment, what's up and not. Again, super nice tool, super useful, helped me out a lot. One of the tools, and again, this is not so much about one tool that fits all. This is going to be a collection of tools that I used, at least, to get going.
And prunes are very, very good.
I was going to say, the next one that I'm going to talk about is prune.
Yeah.
It's not an abbreviation in this case. It's a tool that's been developed by a now ex-Jamf engineer. He is happily retired, I've heard. But yeah, it's a tool. What it does, it scans your Jamf environment, and it lets you chuck all the stuff that you don't need without faff in the bin. So when you do use this tool, make sure to make a backup beforehand, and the tool lets you do that. So the way to work with this tool, again, is relatively simple.
Deleting stuff is easy, undeleting it is hard.
I was going to say, make a backup before you start, and we'll get to making backups just in a little bit with a different tool that I always love to use as well. Again, getting started with this tool, super easy. We need the Jamf Pro address, which I hope you know. By now, you need to have an account that has at least read privileges. And if you want to delete stuff, make sure to give it delete privileges, otherwise it won't work. Start scanning, and it gives you some output. And again, it also gives you at this window the opportunity to make an export of what it is that you're going to delete. Because if you've deleted it, undeleting it, very, very hard. Once you run the tool, once you scan it, what it does is it's going to tell you all of the stuff that's not used anywhere. And like Richard said, another thing that's super important when you inherit the system is that a lot of things have been set up for a reason. So it's also super important just to have a chat with your new colleagues and find out before you delete stuff what it's actually for.
Yeah.
The answer is, I don't know, then it's probably a good idea to delete it.
People like to set up smart groups for reporting, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and they do integrate with other systems, so even though a smart group or an advanced search may not be used somewhere, in the interface it may actually be used somewhere else. And you don't want to be the one that breaks it. Again, the usage of this tool, like I mentioned before, you can make an export of this as well. Super good. It's not a way to back up things, by the way, just a nice way of you knowing what you're gonna delete before you actually go ahead and delete it. And once you're done with all of that, you click delete and it does its thing. So a very good tool to do basic housekeeping in the Jamf instance that you just inherited. Now, I alluded to this before, and this one's just going to be a single slide because the tool basically speaks for itself. It's an awesome tool. This tool is also developed by the Jamf team. This is called Jamf Migrator. There's a lot of Jamf tools that contain migrate in the name, but this is the Migrator. So what it does is it takes stuff from one Jamf and it puts stuff in the other one. Who here does not have a test instance of Jamf? All right, so if you don't have a test instance, go talk to your Jamf customer success team, and they will give you one for free. So you can play around with that, break stuff, all of that. And what I suggest you do is you can use the Jamf migrator to migrate the content from one Jamf into the other, and vice versa. So you could also use that to build stuff in your test environment, select it, and migrate it over to prod without, having to redo all of the work and the.
And having also used this, you will have to watch out for dependencies. There's a certain order of operations to this, and you kind of have to work that one out. For example, if something's got a category in it and you haven't copied the categories over, it's going to fail.
Yeah. Well, there is an option in Migrator to actually tick a box that you migrate the dependencies. It's really good to actually tick that box. Otherwise, if you have a policy that's in a category called testing and you don't have that category testing in your new Jamf environment, that thing will fail. And it won't tell you why it failed. It just says, I don't feel like it today.
But free test environments are a good thing.
Yeah, free test environments don't cost you a thing. Talk to your customer success team and they'll be able to provide that for free.
So this is the part where we go, I opened the distribution point and I found this.
I don't know if everybody can see this slide, but this is a real world scenario. It's not from my current company, just clearing that up. But this is an example that I've seen before.
We have many things that we have both seen here, misnamed packages. If you actually look very carefully, there's only actually one package with a name of any use whatsoever in that entire list.
There's that.
So this is where we get to the nightmare of any admins.
We on the next challenge, lads. How can we be this rubbish?
And it's true. How can we be this rubbish?
I know.
But that's where we get onto the final tool, which is suspicious package. We love suspicious package. We love the name of it, even though I know for a fact that the author doesn't like the name of it anymore. He thought it was funny at first, but he doesn't think it is now. I think he's wrong. I think this is hilarious. So what does suspicious package do? It basically allows you to examine the contents of packages, not just the files it puts in place, but the scripts as well. You can also see from up there, you can see whether or not this thing has actually been properly signed and notarized, and how much space it's going to take. So this thing's really, really useful.
It's free too.
Yeah.
You don't need to pay for it.
Yeah, again, I don't know how he does it for free, but I'm incredibly grateful. So in that screenshot you've got there, yeah, you can see the contents of this thing here called WebLinks v6. We can't actually see on the screen down here. So yeah, that's putting a bunch of files on a certain person's desktop. And then you can look at that and just go, we have a user that's called 0001. No wonder this doesn't work. And yeah, you load it up, you press the space bar, and you can quick look at the various scripts that are inside it, and you can then see what these things are doing. So we'll move on to the next section, which is Zen and the art of the GUI.
I had a look on the internet, and this was on it.
Whoa, what's it?
What did you find?
I'll tell you that after. Okay, so I'm going to do a scenario. And the scenario is that you have started a new company. And what basically happened is the previous admin left because after 21 espresso shots and 2 pints of sake, decided that being a goat herder in the Mongolian Manchurian steppe was a good idea. And they were more than a little paranoid. And they decided to obfuscate everything. And the only thing that you've got is your trusty Jamf administrator account, because it's like the one thing that wasn't. So what do you do next? Well, the answer is we have to get into some reverse engineering. So, well, we have a blank slide there. Interesting. Well, we have 2 blank slides there. So here's an example of a policy. This is like a worst case scenario. Hopefully you never encountered this in the field. And when you look at this thing, it's like, okay, it's installing a package called DI. It's installing another package called DIS. And then it's running a script called up. What is that doing? Okay, well, let's have a look inside the policy itself. So the first thing we do is we look at scripts. And unfortunately, there's no parameters being passed, so there's no useful information there, unfortunately. But that's okay, because what we'll then do is we've noticed that this thing is also a self-service policy. And that quite clearly says display link driver. Okay, right, we've got a better idea. But we're still not quite there yet. There's still a few other bits we've got to do. Now, I don't have a slide for the next bit where I look at the scope, but the scope is a smart group. And the smart group looks like this. And the criteria is DIS, and it is not, and what looks suspiciously like a version number, but we need to confirm. Well, having been around the block with Jamf a few times, I know that there's no inbuilt criteria called DIS. So that means that this is probably an extension attribute. And lo and behold, it is, and it's running the script. And that gives us the next clue, where it quite clearly is looking for display link manager, and it's looking at the info P list, and it's looking to see if it's installed, and then it's doing some weird things trying to find out what the version number is. Yep, okay, cool, right. We now know what this thing is. What does the rest of it do? What are these packages? Well, anyone who's on a reasonably recent version of Jamf Pro now has this thing in the corner, the download button.
And if you don't have that for whatever reason,
Upgrade.
upgrade.
Yeah, upgrading is one of the best things you can do. But that download button, I don't have to keep an archive anymore. Well, I do anyway, but anyway, that's another story. So guess what? We're going to throw that suspicious package. We're going to have a look and see what this thing does. OK, so let's recap. We have a policy called D. We have packages DI and DS, and then script up. It's a self-service policy with a display label for display link. And it's scoped to a smart group called a P. OK. It's checking non-standard attribute for what looks like a version number. And is attached to a custom extension attribute script that's looking for display link version. And then we confirm in suspicious package that the two packages are indeed to do with display link. One's the display link installer, and the other one is the separate package they provide to do the launch agent, so it automatically runs. Why the heck is it done like this? Well, that's easy, because if anybody's ever had any experience with display link does not like installing over the top of itself. So you can install new versions of display link over older versions of display link, but if you put the same version or older over the top, it will error. So that accounts for some of the weirdness with the smart groups and the version checking. And that's why the EA is there to capture the version and test it against it. And it makes also that the policy disappears when the Jamf inventory says that display link is installed and matches that version. Really? So the takeaway here is check everything with a fine-tooth comb. Sometimes you're working around other people's foibles, sometimes you're working around vendor foibles.
And while you're at it and checking stuff with a comb, it goes without saying, just document it. It takes you 2 seconds.
Yeah.
It helps you out later, trust me.
Write it down. Change the names to something more meaningful. Yeah, I love stuff in plain English. That's terrible if someone speaking a foreign language comes into our company, but you know, somebody will be able to read it. So, otherwise, yeah, it's like that. And on that happy note, back to the studio.
Thank you.
Really, reality, it's question and answer, but yeah.
All right. Do we have any questions?
See that man there with the microphone? Or is this going to be the quickest JNUC talk in history?
Wow.
Alrighty, I think that's.
No, there's one person at the
here we
back.
go. Right. Thank you. You
person at the
just
back.
to make me run.
Run, Marcus, run.
I have somebody here in the front also going to make Marcus run.
Just going back to the one of the first slide, how did you get Apple to move the APNS to another?
Oh, to move the Apple ID from one address to another. Okay.
You need stuff.
Oh, yes. First of all, you're going to need to find the topic ID. And if you're lucky, you can pull that out of Jamf Pro. The topic ID for the MDM certificate. Then you need to contact Apple, specifically Enterprise, and you need to ask them very, very nicely if they can do this. They will then make you jump through all sorts of hoops. You will have to you'll have to provide proof of identity for yourself, proof of identity possibly for the company, and they may have changed that since I did this like 4 years ago. But yeah. I hope you're not on a deadline for that certificate to expire. because we managed to get it done in 2 months, and I was panicking. Other people have had more time. But this is not a quick process, but it is possible to recover a cert from a Apple ID that you no longer have control over and transfer it to an Apple ID that you do have control over.
It helps also if you actually have that original certificate file, but yeah.
That's not always the case. No. I had to do that one the hard way.
Any other questions?
So along the same lines, you're saying you were able to convince Apple to handle that, but you had already said that all the previous machines, anything enrolled before such and such date because
yes.
it had a different token. As you and I talked the other day, I had run into a similar situation where the MDM had been renewed with a different Apple ID and a completely different MDM topic.
Yes.
So you were able to then have what? Get all the other machines that with the old topic caught up, or
there's two things that happened here. The first one was that the previous admin had put a brand new certificate over the top of the old one, and then he ran off, and then the now valid certificate was then in an Apple ID that none of us controlled.
Okay. So it wasn't actually you were able to merge the two topics.
He didn't merge the topics, no.
Okay, so I still would have been screwed. Okay, thank you.
No, we were, and because we didn't have enough staff, those things basically had to be weeded out over time. And by the way, the funny story is when we shut down one of the floors of the company and I was ripping the Apple TVs out, I noticed that none of these things had received and done an inventory update since, I think it was September 24th, 2019. So we pinned the exact date it happened down.
Thank you.
And also, if that happens to you, when somebody reads it with a different Apple ID, it's become a matter of time. If you happen to have access to the original Apple ID, you could renew it, but then again, you have a split fleet, so you're going to have to make a choice. Which ones are we going to re-enroll? Are we going to do the one?
And it is a re-enroll job.
And that is what I ran into. Is I
yeah.
Make the choices. Which is the biggest group? Smallest.
Yeah. Yeah. You need to make that decision. And what's the smallest group? But some persons are screwed.
And in our case, we made the decision. Rather, I made the decision because nobody else was making decisions. That we're just going to have to roll with the new one and keep going, and then the old ones would then basically cycle out over time, because we were re-imaging machines quite often back then.
Hi.
Hi.
New Jamf person here. Besides securing your push certificate and your Jamf credentials, what's the other top 2 things or accounts that I don't know about that I should be looking for?
Ooh.
Hopefully I do know about them, but.
Well, your business or school manager accounts is helpful.
Yeah.
If you don't have that.
Make sure that you have a generic Apple ID, say it.support@yourdomain.com. Have that used for your DEP and your VPP tokens. Have a separate one that's like it.push@yourdomain.com, and have that one explicitly for the APNS portal, and keep them separate, and make sure nobody purchases apps on them ever. The minute somebody does that, these things break, and that's actually a problem I'm still wrestling with right now.
And on that topic, if you do use an Apple ID or come into a situation where you've used an Apple ID with 2-factor on your APNS certificate, make sure to write down the phone number, because you're only going to get the last 2 digits. And if your last 2 digits are 00, good luck.
Because there is the other fun thing of you might be able to get that phone number replaced with something like a Google Voice number. I've heard reports of people having problems with that, but that's generally the better way of doing it, because that means if it's forwarding those text messages off to a round-robin email address, it means you can leave and people are still going to have access. Yeah.
Hi. On the previous question, you mentioned something about inventory update not happening.
MDM inventory update on iOS. Yeah.
So 2-part. One is, why wasn't the inventory update not happening for years? And
because the MDM certificate was replaced and therefore it was invalid and didn't work anymore.
Okay. And then second part was, how did you make that cadence of regular updates be more more frequent or more regular?
Well, that's actually an MDM, if I'm understanding this correctly, that's actually a control in your MDM, and you can choose daily, weekly, or monthly on Jamf, and that's all you've got on that side. If you're referring to updating the certificates, well, the certificates need updated every single year, but I borrowed a leaf from Rich Troughton, and I love you, Rich. You're a great guy. And he does his, I think, every half year or something, and I do mine every quarter. So I can get hit by a bus tomorrow, and then you've got 3/4 of a year to sort it out, whoever my replacement is.
No more questions? Thank you very much, gentlemen. Let's give them a round of applause.